Hello, I'm Stephen Roy Goodman, host of Higher Education Today. Welcome back to another edition of our show. I'm here in Traverse City, Michigan, at Northwestern Michigan College, where we're going to be speaking about freshwater studies and marine technology. And specifically, I'm here with Hans VanSumeren, who is the director of the Great Lakes Water Studies Institute. Welcome.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having us here. Hans, maybe if we can start with just a basic question, which is, why is there a Water Studies Institute here, and why is this so important?
Right. So Traverse City, Michigan is located directly on Lake Michigan, one of the 5 Great Lakes. We have a position with our college that is very unique. And when you think of water institutions around the world, one of the key traits is always to be located directly on the water. So our college has a campus that allows us direct access onto Lake Michigan. We have our own private harbor. We have our own research vessels. We have all kinds of equipment that allow us to engage and work in and around water, from technology, from policy, from management, from science, from basically an interdisciplinary and comprehensive approach.
Well, can you say a word or two about that interdisciplinary approach? So I assume you have scientists, I assume you have people who are specialists in analyzing things about the health of the water.
Everything we do with our programming is really focused on how do we create a better person for operating in today's world environment. And so it does take technology, it takes science understanding, it takes understanding of data and what to do with data once it's been presented. So our students are well versed across those disciplines and work in many different fields across those disciplines.
Well, maybe if you could say a word or two about that work. So what are some jobs that students would do? I realize you can't speak about every student who's ever gone through the program here, but what are some typical jobs that students go through?
Yeah, it's interesting because water represents probably the most atypical job category because the way the federal job registries work, that they just don't classify jobs around water. They often will be a civil engineer or a marine biologist. And so our students work in all those fields, but probably if you gave them titles, they would be hydrographic survey technicians, they would be biological science technicians, they would be working in fisheries and wildlife management, they might be policy directors, they could be corporate social sustainability administrators for large companies. I mean, these are the new job titles that we've really captured, and they're much needed throughout the world.
Well, maybe if I could ask you about one of the old job titles, and I realize you said new, but old. What if I just wanted to make sure that the water I was drinking was clean?
Sure. So from a conventional standpoint, a traditional standpoint, a student coming out of the program can work as a wastewater treatment manager or a water treatment manager, and we have students working in these areas throughout the United States.
And what about students who are interested in issues of security, making sure that the water supply is safe?
So water security is becoming a much bigger issue, both from need in terms of access as well as making sure what we have access to is clean and safe. And so students work in the same municipalities for testing and understanding water security, both from a chemical standpoint in terms of terroristic activities to cleaning and providing it back to communities after it's been run through a plant. I mean, they do all those things. These are part of regular job titles. They're just coming more to the forefront of everyone's knowledge because of some situations around the world.
Well, speaking of situations around the world, I'm assuming that you're referring to the situation in Cape Town, South Africa, where the city might be running out of water.
Yeah, you look at Cape Town. Cape Town is a very unique but very real and very relevant to what water means around the world today. So the fact that a country or a portion of a country that large is approaching what we call 0 day, or what they're calling 0 day, where there is no more water, we turn on the taps and nothing comes out, that's a real issue. And the challenges they're facing in trying to overcome that, how will they generate more water? How will climate continue to affect them? How will new technologies help resolve some of these problems? Those are the things that we focus our students on. Those are the activities that we want them to think about. Those are the roles of today's and tomorrow's new water managers.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because my understanding is that you have something to do with even helping, is it China, where you're in China and helping them deal with some of their water management issues as well?
Yeah, so we work interdisciplinary across the world, and China has been a major partner with us over the last 5 years. the school that we work with in China, we're actually training their students on how to use technology to help understand major river systems, hydroelectric facilities, water conveyance, moving water throughout countries, north to south, south to north. So we're working with this university to train their students on the things that we do in the Great Lakes. And freshwater to us is not, it's a luxury, but it's a given. We believe our taps will work all the time. In China, that's not necessarily the case. The water is not safe to drink. The water is not always located where it's needed. And so massive infrastructure is developed in these countries, and the tools we teach here have a lot of value there.
Well, we're going to be hearing from some people who've gone to NMC in terms of the specific tools they've gotten. But before we speak to them, is there anything else that you would like to add for a viewer who may be thinking about or hearing about water issues for the first time?
Yeah. I think if you're hearing about water issues or trying to understand what that might mean to you, I would say that the future is bringing many more of these challenges, and that the world really represents an opportunity to work and have a very successful career in water-related fields. And our school is unique. Sometimes we're the first and only in what we do, and we deliver a very comprehensive and very relevant degree pathway to help work in those areas.
Well, we really appreciate your time. We really appreciate you having us here. And now we're going to hear from some students and some graduates of NMC. I'm here at Northwestern Michigan College. We're continuing our discussion about freshwater studies. And I'm here with Erica Plesha, who was a graduate of NMC and is now, I believe, working for the National Park Service.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. And did I get that right? You are working for the Park Service.
I am. I'm working for Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, which is part of the National Park Service, as a biological science technician.
Okay, and what does that mean exactly as a technician?
So my job out there is I'm a crew lead, which we are doing studies on avian botulism. There are partnerships with different universities and other companies that are studying botulism across Lake Michigan. So I am in charge of the people that are out studying, looking for dead birds and other signs of potential botulism in Lake Michigan.
But Lake Michigan is a big place. How are you going to find all the dead birds?
So we have 32 miles of shoreline within the Park Service, and they're monitored on a weekly basis. We have volunteers and myself that go out on at least once a week, and they walk the beaches looking for any dead birds. If they are to find any that are viable for testing, we send them to the USGS, which is the United States Geological Service, and those are studied, and then we find out if there's actually botulism in those birds. Many times we can't collect the birds because they are decaying or they've been scavenged, and in that case they bury the birds.
And what about other signs? What are some other signs that things are not going well in the Great Lakes?
Largely, it is due to invasive species and the cladophora that is growing, which is an algae, which is where they think that the botulism is thriving. It thrives in the decaying algae, and then potentially it can be given to birds through eating gobies that have been in the cladophora, mussels. There's many theories about it. They can't pinpoint for sure, but part of it is studying these birds, and because the birds are eating this and then dying from it.
And what about people? So we want to make sure that the water is safe for people to drink. How do we make sure that the water is safe?
As far as the botulism goes, it has to be ingested, so that would be very difficult. There's been very minimal cases. I'm not sure exactly worldwide, but it's not something that you and I are going to get because we're not going to eat the gobies, we're not going to eat the cladophora, we're not going to eat the mussels. It's because of the birds potentially eating these things that they then ingest it and die from it.
And in terms of the safety of the 32 miles that you mentioned, what are some other things that you're looking for in that 32-mile area?
So the volunteers are reporting live birds, dead birds. They report if they're seeing this algae being washed up on shore. They report if they're seeing shells being washed up. All of these are signs of potential outbreaks, but that's really what they're doing, is they're indicating the temperature, their wind, they just take a full account of what's going on at that point during their walk.
And before we say goodbye, is there something that I should be asking you, because I'm not an expert in the Great Lakes? Is there something else that I should be asking you that I'm not about the health of the Great Lakes in terms of your great work?
I think that it's important that these studies continue to go on. I think it's important that students and the public get involved, and I think we need to protect our Great Lakes, and all of this is good information and can be shared amongst the different groups that are studying it. I just feel that it's important work, and we need to protect these Great Lakes that we have.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're continuing our discussion at Northwestern Michigan College, and I'm here with John Lutchko, who's actually a professor here. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, John, if you could say a word or two about what kind of work did you do as a student, and what are you doing now as a professor?
So I got my 2-year degree in freshwater studies here at NMC, went on to get a 4-year degree from Western Michigan University in freshwater science and sustainability. And in 2012, as part of my degree requirement, I had to take an internship, and I decided to work in a partnership with NMC and the National Park Service, conducting multi-beam sonar surveys of Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore in support of some benthic habitat research. And that really sort of piqued my interest in the technology side as well as the scientific side.
And what specific things were you doing on both sides?
Well, so the project itself was mapping the bottom of the lake to identify areas where cladophora algae could be sort of piling up and collecting, which was causing the botulism toxin, which was causing some other issues with bird die-offs and things like that. So it was using technology, but it was in direct support of this scientific research, which was being conducted, based on studies that were needed to be for the health of the lakes.
Well, in terms of the health of the lakes, can you say a word or two about what are some of the key indicators of whether or not the lakes are healthy?
Well, healthy is an interesting word when it comes to the Great Lakes, because you could argue now they are clearer than they've ever been before. They look cleaner, but cleaner isn't always better. We've had a big incursion of invasive freshwater mussels that have caused considerable changes in the ecosystem of the lakes. A lot more filtering is being done, so the bottom of the food chain is changing. So we're seeing sunlight penetrating deeper, more native species are being sort of outcompeted by these invasive species. So it's how do we understand what's going on, how do we evolve with it, and how do we monitor these changes in the lakes?
Well, you mentioned invasive species. So what makes it invasive? Because my understanding is that all species are trying to survive.
That's true. That's absolutely true. And I've heard that argument too. But the idea of invasive species is it's non-native. It's come in, and there are many species that were non-native that have come into the lakes that have not caused as much of a change. These invasive mussels in particular have caused a drastic change, which has had a directly negative effect on the native species in the lake. So it's sort of if you look at it like a gauge, it's how much of a significant impact have they had on the native species of the lakes, and these mussels in particular have had a significantly negative impact and are continuing to do so.
And in terms of the continued growth of those invasive species, my understanding is that that's an issue not only in freshwater but all over the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. They see it with non-native fish species, again, outcompeting. It's all about outcompeting, taking the resources, the niche that if you will, that the native species were in, and you're seeing it in areas in the Pacific Ocean, in the Caribbean. Those aren't things I study directly, but it's the same concept no matter where you are. Something from the outside comes in and drastically changes an ecosystem that had previously been operating pretty well.
And fair enough. Before we say goodbye today, are there things that your students are struggling with right now? Some concepts that seem to be difficult for students that somehow you're spending a little more time explaining?
Well, I think, if you look at our programs here, I think things that students can struggle with is the idea that science and technology. So scientific research and technology, they go hand in hand. You're going to be using some of this type of equipment, whether it's remotely operated vehicles, sonars, water quality sondes. That kind of technology directly is used in scientific research, in monitoring the lakes, whether it's fish habitat research, invasive species monitoring, things like that. You know, they're not separate entities. They are directly related, and I think that without one, there can't be the other to be as effective as they should be.
Well, that's a fair point. One follow-up to that, if I may, which is, what do you want regular people to do? People who aren't studying water per se. What would you like the average person on the street to do to make sure that the Great Lakes or other water is safe?
I think just understand the basic concepts. Take time to read about certain issues in the Great Lakes. Just educating yourself on even the basic stuff that's going on. That's really important to sort of becoming a steward for the lakes, having those conversations. It's all about conversations, whether it's between one person or 10 people, having those conversations about the value of these Great Lakes and what they do, how they should be here for generations, and how we should allocate resources and allocate people to do that kind of work for the lakes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. We're continuing our discussion at Northwestern Michigan College, and I'm here with two students who are third-year students. I'm here with Shane, and I'm here with Renate. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Well, Renate, maybe if I could start with you. Why did you come here to study, and what exactly are you studying?
I came here to study marine technology. It involves ROVs, data collection, and then I came here because they have a lot of equipment and resources and opportunities that a lot of other schools I looked at didn't have.
Such as?
Well, they have just the amount of equipment. We have 2 different ROVs, we have sonars, we have different data collection equipment, so it's just a really good opportunity.
Well, fair enough. And Shane, I'm going to do one of the things that hosts are never supposed to do. I'm going to pass the microphone over to you. I'm going to trust you to speak to our Higher Education Today audience and explain specifically what you're studying here.
Okay. So I came to NMC to study marine technology primarily because it's really the only program of its kind in the United States, and that we bridge the technician level with more engineering skills and the subsea sectors. So we utilize sonars, which allow us to provide acoustical images of shipwrecks and underwater structures that are used in infrastructure, research, scientific research and whatnot. And then we also utilize one of our biggest things we utilize is the remotely operated vehicles. And we use in underwater intervention, all the same sectors, using the oil and gas industry, renewable energy, scientific exploration and whatnot.
And if I may ask both of you, where do you see your futures taking you with the skills that you're developing here at NMC?
Really anywhere. Like, I'm hoping to either help private or military industry to just with their work, like with the intelligence and the data we can collect from these vehicles and different equipment. So.
And last word.
I'm hoping to get into the renewable energy sector. I would rather do that than oil and gas, just because of the background where the energy is coming from. And I'm looking at becoming possibly an applications engineer or something, working for a customer to come up with the type of subsea platforms that they would need to accomplish a task subsea.
And I realize I said last word, but I have one last question, which is, what advice would you give for high school students who are thinking about coming here?
Just come willing to learn. They have a lot to offer. They have great instructors with great experience, and I think that's just the one thing that'll help you out the most.
I would say to stay motivated and really look for that passion and drive to study, because that's really what's gonna push you, and find something that you enjoy and stick with it.
Thank you both, and good luck to both of you.
Thank you.
We're continuing our discussion at Northwestern Michigan College about freshwater studies with Marguerite Cotto, who is one of the vice presidents here. I believe you're the vice president for lifelong learning.
Yes, Steve, I am.
Well, congratulations on that position. And my understanding is also you had something to do with the creation of this Water Studies Institute at the beginning.
I'm pleased to say that I've been here from the very beginning, inspired by the fact that we have 20% of the world's surface fresh water at our doorstep, and we needed to commit to some type of programming that connected us with that resource.
And now you're at this massive facility where you do all sorts of really interesting research.
We do. We have the fabulous combination of leading edge technology in a very specialized field and a branch of our program, or a stream of our program, if you will, that addresses what you do with the data, the science, the technology in terms of community education, awareness, understanding, policy, and that's our freshwater half. It's a beautiful blend that can open the door for the community to understand its place in this conversation and for our students to understand what they're going to do with this for the future of water.
Interested that you said that because I'm kind of struggling with what a regular person can do with this information, as opposed to reading in the newspaper that, that something's going wrong with the Great Lakes. What do you want regular people to be able to do?
When we were beginning Great Lakes Water Studies Institute, that was a key question that came to us from two parts of our community. Citizens who live not necessarily on the Great Lakes, but on inland lakes, wanted to know what they could do individually to protect, improve, or otherwise engage with the water resources right in front of them. It could be septic tank concerns, it could be algae blooms. They wanted to know what to do, how to have some form of impact. At the same time, we had small environmental organizations in the community that had a lot of information and wanted to know how to connect it to those citizen concerns. So the individual, the citizen in this community, prompted us to talk a lot about how science and community come together. What's that interface? How do you give them effective tools, simple tools, that allow them to engage knowledgeably? We did a lot in our first few years of community education in partnership with local environmental community groups to get information out and show how information can be used. We also developed a program through our library. It's called OWL. It's our online water library. It's a very small project, but the idea was that community organizations that were doing observational studies of their inland lakes or recording any type of data could have one common place where all that information would be put together. In future years, we may be able to have a project that puts it all together so it's better used by research organizations. But it was a good indicator of citizens being observers of change in their own backyard, finding simple ways to document that, and then having something to compare it to. For most of us, that might be one of the most important things that as citizens we can do relative to the condition of our water.
That's really interesting. Is that something that's happening in other countries as well?
I would say worldwide, there probably is more that's happening along those lines. Small communities of interested observers who have a glass of water first-person stake in the outcome of cleanliness, access, protection, preservation. We've had the opportunity to work with a particular institution. It's a technical school in the Yellow River region in central China. And they work on very massive structures. They are the industrial strength part of this. They're trying to learn from us what happens when you take all that scale down to what does one person do. It's an interesting exchange of ideas. In Central America, in our relationship with Earth University in Costa Rica, we get an opportunity for our students to see a different view of what one person can do in a country in which it's a national priority to address ecological values, safety of the environment, protection of water. We don't have necessarily that national view that all citizens are stewards. Our perspective in the United States is that citizens choose stewardship of things that matter to them. So in South America, in Central America, certainly when our students have traveled to South Africa, which they have done, more and more small communities organize around the logical thing: protect, understand, preserve. They don't get a lot of press, they don't get a lot of media. It's slow, methodical work. And I'm not sure there's a place our students haven't traveled where they have not seen that firsthand.
Well, that's interesting. And in terms of the media, that's why Higher Education Today is here at Northwestern Michigan College to cover the interesting work that you and your colleagues are doing. Could you say a word or two about specifically what you're hoping that students who are graduating from the program are then going to go ahead and do?
I'd love to, Steve. We have a great, lofty vision for what our students are doing. We expect that our graduates have very refined technical skills. They will not be very broad, but they will be excellent team leaders, problem solvers, and they will have expertise that contributes technically to teams anywhere around the world that are doing documentation, capture of information in the marine environment and in the aerial environment. We have both of those pieces. We expect our graduates in our freshwater side to understand scientific information, communication in the public sphere, that they would understand how to connect one conversation on the technical and scientific side to the policy side. Above all, and for all our graduates, we hope that these programs inspire and light that flame of understanding, stewardship, pride, joy, that they're touching water and they're making a difference.
Well, that's a great way to describe it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. If you would like additional information about the Water Studies program and Marine Technology program at Northwestern Michigan College, please visit nmc.edu. If you have comments or suggestions about the show, Higher Education Today, please send an email to highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. And thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. I'm Stephen Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.